Let's get that to work. I don't think there's any sound with this. I think it's just, can we make it bigger? Come on. Well, this is how they, this is everything that led up to it, which is kind of insane, right? Can you see this? What's going on with this? All right, yeah, so 12 years. That's some good calculations, you know, like we've got the, so yeah, so March 2004. Can you see this? Right. Okay, so we get a little help from Mars.
Oh, they launched it in 2004?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've been working on this one. So Earth is helping out again. I mean, this is a lot of crazy calculation. Hold on, now where are we? We here? Yeah. So this is like, let's look at an asteroid, okay? 2008, I mean, 6 years ago still. And then we're after this one. Earth's gonna help again, a little bump. And yeah, it's gonna sneak in here. All right, let's have a look at another asteroid. This is really nuts. Yep. We're gonna have a snooze for a few years, which is probably a good plan, but look at that, that's good work. That really is good work. Well done, humans. I mean, embarrassing to any, you know, space traveling aliens, obviously, but and then XKCD makes cartoons about it, and it gets tweeted about. It tweets. Well, someone tweets, but yeah, it looks like it tweets, right? I mean, there's an account for the little lander, and it's tweeting pictures of itself, and I don't know if it took a selfie, but it took, the little probe took a picture of the lander, and the lander took a picture of the, I think, and they tweeted these things, right? Yeah. So, all right, and there's more stuff that's going to happen, but this is the putative, you know, might run out, but that's pretty, it's 11 years floating around, so, but I guess it can just sit there now and maybe tweet things, tweet its development. All right, that was cool. That was pretty cool. I didn't really know this was, you know, what was going on. Not really. I mean, vaguely, but you know.
One of the coolest things about how they did that was that they were like, okay, let's see how we can get out there by using gravity assist.
Yeah.
And then they were like, let's see if we can tweak it enough. And so that's why they ended up with the two encounters.
Oh, to grab those as well.
So those were on purpose. They were like, let's see.
So that seems that's. That really seems insane. So that's good work, and obviously they're doing this in 2000, you know, I don't know when they first started this, must have been in the late 90s, I suppose. Computing, right? Okay, so that was cool. I have a few other things to show you. This I didn't show you the other day. I want to show you this. This is great. So this is, let's get it here. All right, so this is 1801. It's 4 empires, and this is just a nice little visualization. It's been around for a while. Well, it depends which side you're on. But so they're nucleated, so you can see it's going to clock through. So this is Spain, Venezuela just popped off, and Paraguay. So it's a visualization of, which one is that? Argentina, yeah, just disappeared. So Spain is, yes. Brazil, Empire of Brazil pops off. And it's not really showing what's being absorbed, but these ones are getting, well, it seemed to lose a bit, but they get fatter because they're doing the whole English colonization thing, and I think they're going to go, so there's not much happens for, oh. I think we can skip a few.
Well, in 1811, wasn't Spain controlled by the French? Part of the French Empire, because it was Joseph Napoleon who was running it.
Right, so there's some complications that are probably being simplified here. Philippines have just gone, so this is 1900. Guam, which is on a different team now. It's just a really, I mean, it's a big part of the history of the world. You know, good and very bad. I mean, very bad things. I mean, these maniacs spread democracy. You know, India's a giant democracy because of these, and they play cricket, which is good. But you know, very bad things as well. So, Egypt, and who are we losing now? I think that's Canada, is it? Yeah, Canada. So I don't know what the sizes are too. I mean, Canada's gigantic, obviously. We're going to get Australia? Yes. Not really. I mean, we're still part of the whole, the Queen is the Queen. Canada, right? Got the Queen on the stamps and yeah. New Zealand, Sri Lanka. So India, of course, right? Pakistan, Bangladesh. Pakistan coming from it's an acronym. It's a crazy acronym, PAK. Astan, the whole thing. And then, yes, this. Wow. Portugal sneakily has been kind of hanging on to everything, but it's going to lose, okay. A lot of, Mozambique, Angola, right. Brazil was in the 1800s, and it was the Empire of Brazil. So I think the last one is Macau, escapes at some point here from Portugal. Anyway. Hong Kong, and that was Macau drifting away. So that Hong Kong is, famously, of course, there it is, pop. And then Macau escapes. Interesting. Yeah. All right, new franchises. Okay, so, that was the thing. That was at the end of the other one. What else am I going to show you? There's a whole thing. So we're going to get back to scaling, which is fun. But I have videos of others. You don't need to see that. This is, and we talked about this a little bit in office hours yesterday. So we have some data, we have scripts from movies now, and we're going to add this properly to the Hedonometer website. But these are just, we can't do the little word shifts on these. These are just the shapes of the scripts in terms of this happiness measure that we have. And so, so this is Jane Eyre. So so if you look at the actual, the book, and depends, of course, on the movie adaptation, but this structure you can see in the book as well, right? And of course the language used in movies is different. Here's Jaws 2, ends badly. Jaws. So there are a couple of them really get it, at the end, Jerry Maguire. There's a lot of this, there's a lot of periodic behavior, which is very tempting, right? We talked about some little Fourier spectrum action. But things are good, disaster, lots of things with a sort of examples where there's a bit of a disaster towards the end. So there's a ton of stuff to play. Here we go. I don't know. Jimmy and Judy, do we know these movies? Judge Dredd fans? Knowledgeable about the... There's Juno, some bad things happen towards the end. What's that? All right, important, thank you. But so we also so there's a lot of structure put into movie scripts now, right? So there's a book called Save the Cat, which has become broadly sort of very, very famous and probably overused. So and I think within that there are 9 pieces that you need in your movie. This is how you make your script, and you have script smiths who will come in and make sure everything's okay. Something very bad has to happen in the second beat sort of thing. Someone has to, one of the good guys has to die. So there's a real structure to it. And before it was more of the 3-part piece, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, all these things. Anyway, so if movies all look the same, there's a reason. They're following some general script. Jurassic Park, we have all sorts of weird things in here. Kill Bill, Volume 1 and 2. Good stuff. All right, King Kong, So, boop. Okay, a little fun.
Some movies are considered like high art, not like mainstream movies, but more like.
What do you want?
I'm not sure. I'm just thinking. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Well, Citizen Kane. Let's go for Citizen Kane, for example. I'm not sure if you. So now, of course, one thing we're missing is all the visual stuff, which is evident, but. There's a little fire at the end, which is very meaningful. We don't pick that up. Meaning, of course, is the thing to measure.
When you do the script, is it just the dialogue?
Just the dialogue with some directions as well. But
that would capture some of the visual stuff.
Yeah, so there's some directions as well. We took that out. So with the Seinfeld one, that was the approach to. So you take out the names of the characters, but that's basically it. So that one's well regarded. Cider House Rules. I think that would fit in there. All right, fun. But that's there's these giant projects we have. This is going to be a good thing. So let's see. Okay. List of things. Had a list of things to do. Empires, jelly beans. I want to read out the meat story because it's hilarious. Let's see, let's go through our little jelly bean action here. See how you characters did. Somewhat intransigent in our voting approach. I don't think I communicated the plan very well. But the idea was in the second and third rounds was you would adapt and respond to each other and as a team collectively move towards the correct answer. But that didn't really, a lot of people stayed in the same thing because I think they're really keen on jelly beans. So, okay, is this working? Ooh, look at the spinning ball of death. Ooh, that's not so good. All right. Let us kill things, I'm afraid. You. Not responding. Okay. That is bad luck for you. Okay, so. Wow. Come on, thing. Kill all, great Unix command. Okay, so let's see. All right, so we had these 4 things, and of course the point of this was it's insanely impossible, right? Who knows what this is? But you have a lurking physicist who's choosing the first, so maybe they just have that in their head. So 27 ounces, and I'll show you some graphs of how we did. Grams for the the grammar files. Jelly beans, 671, that is an estimate of sorts, but I did count 100 and then scale up. I have a good scale at home. 490. We did have one NAN, which was an interesting addition, yeah, which is like, there was a will not play the game entry, which was the first time I've seen that. That's good, fair enough. This did not count towards your, So it was an average of this, how far away you were relatively from this will be the decider of the jelly bean success. So 10 to the 13 cubic miles. Okay, whatever that means. All right, let's see. So individual, so I've got the first 2 letters of your name, so you can see these things here. So, right, very accurate. This is on the weight of the jelly beans. So this is our first off guesses. So there's a bit of a range here, right? We're up to 50 down to 7. So it's that's a good spread. Yeah. This is the number of jelly beans. So blue indicates who's closest in terms of this thing. So for the average, so if we go back here, did well. So think about that. And then we sort of deviate a little bit. All right, so there are. Okay, this was the bin number. So it's a hopeless number. So of course, quite reasonably, some people put, this is on a log scale. Depends if you've worked. I mean, who knows, right? I don't know. Do you shop there regularly? Yeah. Do you have a ballpark estimate? Yeah. So people can be orders of magnitude off. At least they're positive numbers. I give you that one. But there you go. Most people are above. This is the volume of Neptune. So this is on a linear scale. So somewhat off. Most of you were wrong. So yeah, and I maybe I misread things, but yeah. So I think we had a log 10 of 3 here, which sort of puts you on the order of a 10-mile diameter. So it's not very big. Okay, so but these things this is hard. This is a mess. Okay, so yeah, the physicist is happy with this one, and everyone else is below. Right. All right. So collectively, this is what happened. So we had first, second, third rounds. This is for the weight. So bigger spread, and then when you start, people did change their guesses a little bit. There's an outlier up here. This is the usual thing, median, right? And then interquartile, or the quartile, first quartile, second, third one. All right, so that, got a little better, and that's what you might hope, but also when you're voting, and we'll come back to this later on when we go back to the voting work and FAME, which is going to be next week. What can happen is you kind of just go wrong. Like you all start to agree, and you get more confident about it, but you're wrong. And that didn't really change too much here, but there wasn't any improvement over here. So there was some. It narrowed a little bit, but like fine. So there was no correction here. Where are we here? This is that going to change me? No. Yeah. So this is the bin number for French lentils. Yeah. Everyone's above it. There was moving down the median. That's a little better. And here we learned, right? The team team probably understood what, you know, that someone had some knowledge there. So yeah, really, I mean, look, wow. Yeah, that's true. So by the end of it, everyone's on board with this estimate. So you drag them up. There's too many plots, right? This is, so this is the first round, second round, third round. So you could just see the spread again, you know, whether people did any better. But you're trying to help everyone, right? It didn't work out. And I think this one, so yeah, this is Neptune, right? Big spread, gets much tighter, much tighter. Right. More plots of these things. So this, you know, normally what happens is it gets tighter. But you guys held your ground. You held your ground, did not want to play with the team. And I'm just going to, and there's your final result. So jelly beans can be delivered, and I don't really want to throw this because I think it could explode horribly, but very good. A little toss, there you go. There's a lot, so I wouldn't eat them all by myself. Anyway, so yeah. All right, so that's fun. But so there was an element of it. We certainly see it in some, you know, sometimes when I run this, you get people really getting sure about something, but wrong, right? And you guys are all, you know, too independent to fall for this nonsense of humans following each other, right? Okay. Yeah, too strong. Okay, jelly beans.
Have you heard of Science Olympiad?
Which one?
Science Olympiad.
Yeah. Like math Olympiads and all these things, yeah?
There's one called mental estimation for elementary school students.
Oh, right, yeah.
I was like in that, so.
Okay. Right, we have a ringer. Okay, yeah. No, it's a great skill, and you know, it's sort of something that physicists often are pretty good at doing this. Generally, right? They sort of train themselves to be able to estimate things, but they might not be able to tell you how much a chicken weighs. You know, like Neptune, yes.
What tools did you use to make all those plots?
Oh, it's MATLAB. Yeah, it's a bunch of scripts, and there you go. Yeah, that's true. So actually, there are all these past ones, right? I actually have in this archives of from previous years. So this is a good example of, this is Neptune. Everyone was below the estimate here, and then they got more and more sure about something that was not right. You know, here they moved away, got a little more sure around something that was wrong again. So there's all the previous years. This you might know the letters at the top. Team member, yeah. Probably get arrested for doing that. Yeah, so yeah. But it is quite great when the team gets it. Goes in the wrong direction. All right, we're trying to trick you. What else? Okay, all right. The meat story, I totally want to read it, but I'm not going to do it. All right, let's talk about scaling. Let's give this some power because it's a die. Bonk. Right, fun things. Okay. So 1 billion people can be wrong, but a bunch of highly educated graduate students, maybe not. Okay, let's see. So willful. All right, so, okay. Open. All right, exploded on me. Okay, so we got to this thing with isometry. Yes, here we go. All right, so I'm just going to go through some scaling stories here. You know, we've seen some of it already when we talked about cities and words and so on, and we've certainly talked about parallel size distributions quite a lot. But this is what we generally term as allometric scaling, and it's usually a positive exponent that's relating to measurable quantities about some set of systems, right, as we move across scales. So organisms, as I said the other day, make a great example. And so this is from this book. It's Bonner and McMahon, 1983, or the other way around. There's a connection to Strogatz. Actually, I think he was an advisor of Strogatz's at Harvard, so it's all connected. All right, animals are awesome. So this is a collection of big things, right? These are the biggest of their kind. And So there's the human, example human. Blue whale, of course. So you've always got this problem with the dinosaur people. Like we have the big, they're trying to find a seismosaurus, and I just found this giant thing, and it's bigger than any other animal. But then they have to always say, except for whales, right? It's always like we have the biggest, except for whales. So this thing, it's insane. It's 100,000 kilograms, 200,000 kilograms, that sort of thing. That's a lot of stuff in one package.
How old is the book, did you say?
983.
Okay, because number 3, the largest land mammal, it isn't Baleocabelion, it's Intracabelion.
Oh, they've changed this one?
Yeah, I think it just changed the name.
They changed the name. No,
It's Intracabelion.
Yeah. Right. So yes, exactly. They did. Yeah. But what's wrong with which one did we lose when I was a kid? What's a patasaurus?
Brontosaurus is now Patasaurus. We've also lost.
What's wrong with brontosaurus? Damn it, that's a great. Anyway.
We've also lost Triceratops now. There's no such thing as Triceratops. What?
Okay, that's wrong.
No Triceratops.
Is it because the ancient dinosaurs? Is that what's going on? They did. We found their language and they didn't call. They're called Jake now. What is it?
With the Triceratops, the other one that had the really long horns,
Yeah.
and that was just an adult Triceratops. So they were the same species.
But they
They kept the Triceratops name.
see. This is a big deal. This is.
The Triceratops name because it had been named first before the other one.
What's the children? Think of the children. I mean, you take Pluto away, and you're taking Triceratops away. I mean, come on. I mean, mess with the taxonomy a little bit, but no, it's brutal. It's brutal. Well, there's also the big problem with the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they were always fighting in books, right? And now it's who knows. Who knows? Maybe they played chess together. They were like buds.
And also number 6, it should be.
They know too much. What's this?
It should be not Diplodocus. It should be Caesarmosaurus and Gigantosaurus instead of Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah. See, whatever. Okay. So this is a great book in the history of talking about scaling, and it's very enjoyable to read. It's a Scientific American book. So there are a number of these that were done in the, and I've said this the other day, I'm not sure if they're still made, but they went to great efforts to sort of bring in some, experts and create these beautiful books. I should bring it in, but it's got color plates and that sort of thing. And it's just that kind of right, level in between. There's some calculations inside it and so on, but it's really nicely done. All right, well, let's look at other things that are wrong. So this is, this is names aside. This is supposedly the biggest lizard that ever lived, and this is a sheep, which easily fits inside this character. This is the longest tapeworm ever found in a person. This is the longest snake, which come on, so evolution is a monster. So I did tweet. I found myself tweeting this last night because I was watching otter videos, because otters are just fantastic. I mean, evolution produced otters, YouTube, and then otters on YouTube. So it's still not forgivable that it produced snakes and spiders. Anyway, so we've got, this is an ostrich, but is this the biggest?
It should be a moa.
No, it depends on size. All right, well, let's watch out. Right, so New Zealanders had the moa, which is very tall. But there's the elephant bird from Madagascar, which has these giant eggs. The kiwi, so the Struthious birds, the flightless birds, right? The kiwi produces an egg that I think is about a third the size of the organism producing it, which is a lot. Very friendly little things. Anyway, they can't fly, can they? Biggest jellyfish, horrifying thing that you can find on the Arctic cap. I mean, if you want to go and you put your submarine down there, you're in the 1800s with your steampunk thing, and you find a lion's mane jellyfish, which I think they can be like 100 meters sort of thing of the tentacle things. Really not good. Various other things that are big. So there's supposedly the largest land animal. Largest bird must be an albatross. Let's see. Yes, which is pretty awesome. What else? Komodo dragon, which is still in existence. Some crab action. Oh yeah, and the largest tree here, right? So we have the sequoias, which are hundreds of meters. And then for some reason a larch is in there, just to kind of give it some scale. There should be a hammer. But we've got the human. Oh, and a pterodactyl. All right, let's have the largest. Is that the largest flying thing? Largest extinct snake. I mean, you know. Fun times. All right, so, and then these are medium-sized things, all right? So these are medium-sized things, which, you know, it's fine. And I think we have some cool guys in here. The smallest mammal is the flying shrew. That's the smallest frog and the largest frog. Oh no, the largest frog is here, and this is a small frog. This is a generic frog. Yeah, so these are just, this is the way, you know, this is part of it, the way it's laid out. I guess the smallest bird is the hummingbird, right? Which can fly backwards. What else have we got? Okay, and then these are things that you can see, right? But we're getting down to the edge of it. So this is there's a flea here, and then this is the flea's leg scaled up, just to make you feel a little sick. What else have we got in there? We've got human liver cell has been stuck in there, number 10. It's terrific. Things start to get a little weird down at this point. Houseflies and so on, right? All right. So that's good. And then, you know, you start to ask questions, well, let's go across all these scales and see what happens, see what kind of structures we have. So this is, this is just scales of life, right? So we've got down 10 to the minus 13, 10 to the minus 10. These are little functional structures, you know, mitochondria and that sort of thing. There's an amoeba here. We're at the B level. Hamster, great call there. Put the hamster in. Blue whales up here. All right. Elephants are like 4,000 kilograms, that sort of thing. Obviously, humans are kind of trying to move up the scale. Again, 30 years ago, that has changed. Let's see. So, and then, all right. So, number of cell types. So, we'll come back to this a little bit with scaling. Some of the things are like Legos, for example. But many other examples. So this is the there's some measure of mass or volume, but this is volume. It's a size measure. So you could think, so size is the biggest story, right? To start with, you have the size of the organism, which governs so much more about it, and we'll talk about it when we get into this mad business of metabolism and truthicide. All right, it's kind of the big thing, right? You go and measure your animal. You measure all sorts of things about it. VO2 max, you get your sheep running on a treadmill or whatever it is, right? And with some hay out in front. And sheep, very excellent animals, by the way. You measure all these things, but the sort of the big number you have is mass and volume, those two pieces, right? So this is going up through different sizes, and then looking at the number of distinct cell types they have, right? So cell differentiation is this kind of amazing feature of the biological mechanism where cells separate their function, and so a whale is on the order of like 100 and so different kinds of cells, and obviously we're moving through complexity. There's not a lot of we're still in trees and things, sponges and so on. I mean, SpongeBob aside, there are. Well, I guess his IQ was sponge-like. He's a good guy. SpongeBob's a good guy. All right, so that's an interesting, so how many, so you can think of it in engineered systems, right? How many different components do you need or do we create to make a big thing, right? To make whatever it is. Like how many different little pieces do we put together? And what does nature do? Ant colonies and bee colonies and so on. How many different little moving parts do they have to create something that's a sort of a functioning whole? How many middle managers do we know? Like how many different people and things do you need to make a successful, whatever it is, Okay, so that's an interesting thing. So growth, terrifying, right? So if a baby walks in and is this big, but we're fine with the baby. I mean, our brains are like, this is great, baby. Unless there's something wrong with us. Generally speaking, we're totally all right with this. It's all fine. But if you scale a baby up, it's a disaster, right? I mean, so the proportions are really weird, but for whatever reason, we're fine with this. And then, so as we grow, things balance out to be relatively acceptable humans. And so it gives you, so there's a we have this big head thing. There's the growth rates of these things change, and so that's what this is. So this is body height, so you're growing in height. And this is arm length. So these are measurements from, maybe even this is just one individual. So there's a crossover here. So to start with, it's actually growing superlinearly, right? Because the rest of your body's trying to catch up to this giant scone, unless, if it doesn't do that, you're in trouble, right? And then it will go over to an isometric growth story, right? So that these are both length, of course. These are both length measures, so right. And if you had volume, you'd have a power of a third. So that's a crossover in scaling. It's a natural thing. This happens. I don't think they have age here, do they? But it's height, so about a yard. All right. Okay, so we'll think about these things. So there's all sorts of things you can measure across different sizes and shapes and different systems. And so we're still kind of in biology here. This is body weight, and these are world champion at the time, world champion. And of course, steroids is kind of working its way through the system at this point. Eastern Europe really, doing some good stuff with it. I'm sure the US was not. Okay, and then this is their maximum lifts. And I can't tell you what it is, but this is maximum lifts, the world record lift, and this as a function of their weight, right? And so the scaling here is not isometric, it's 2/3. And so the argument that they give is that it's proportional to the cross-sectional area of the individuals. So roughly, you look across humans, people, and if you look across organisms within a species, as adults, they generally do scale somewhat allometrically, right? I mean, isometrically, they're sort of, yeah. So that's sort of plausible, right? That the maximum force you can produce is. So there are all lots of little back-of-the-envelope calculations to justify things that you find. But this scaling is pretty good, and this is something we could check. You can then, of course, start to do things like divide out by the best fit line, or the line that you've decided is the right thing. Like just divide out and see who's, take the residuals and see who's, outperforming in some sense. And that's kind of a fun game to play. So, and it could be just that there's, it's not that there really is a pure scaling through here. You're saying that maybe there is, but there might be something that's better about people in this size range. They just do a better job of, there's the mechanics of how long your limbs are and all sorts of things, and tendons and ligaments, and it's not just as simple as cross sections. Really peculiar thing. What do you want to call this one?
I think it's correct. Well,
correct. These words. So freighted. Well, we'll see. All right. I don't know. All right. We've got this is basal length of skull. Yeah. And then we've got tiny little horns, right? I mean, this is a bit questionable, this one. These are real horns for sure. So, but we're trying to measure these tiny little bumps. That's it there, this bit, not the ears, this little bit. And so we've got a number of examples. So it's the argument here is it's to the power of 4. I don't recall if there's a just so argument for why. I'm not sure. These are now, all right, let's step out of biology. Engines, and these are aircraft engines, right? As I recall, right? So this is engine mass. So simply the mass of them. People are, of course, making engines. They're different kinds of engines. As you move up in scale, you have to kind of revisit parts of how things are built. You could go through different numbers of pistons, all sorts of things. But if you do this and then you plot their maximum, I believe it's their maximum output, sustainable real output. And then this is RPMs that seems to ideally run at, right? So you actually go down in RPMs, right? It runs a bit slow, but this is BHP, British horsepower. What is it? Oh, it's brake horsepower, is it? Why do I think British? I have no idea. All right, BHP, all right. Okay, British, no, I don't know what I'm saying. All right, so horsepower, of course, because, as you went from horsepower to to vehicles and to actual mechanized things, you had to be able to compare it to horses. So that's what everyone was anchored with. This is 4 horses and 5 horses. And this is getting up to 10,000 horses, 100,000 horses, which is a lot. Okay, so but this scale, so mass, so the engines we have made, right, that we've figured out work at different scales, and we want bigger and bigger ones for bigger purposes, scale is a power of 1, right? This is an isometric scaling, so the horsepower scales linearly and isometrically with it, but you get this piece going the other way, right? That the way the thing's cranking over goes down, and so you'll see an aspect of this with. It's a bit different, but you see an aspect of this with organisms because it's a bit of a different thing. But heart rate goes down, right? We'll talk about this later, but heart rate goes down, so you have a little shrew and little hummingbirds and things, and their tickers are going like crazy, and it drops, right? So elephants go boosh, boosh. And there's a sort of a beautiful idea there that, of course, the little guys don't live for so long, right? The lifespan is a highly variable and odd thing. You can get parrots that live for 100 years and know what your great grandparents said to each other in the Civil War or something weird like that. But if you look at, say, time to reproductive age, that's a better scaling, I think, with body size. And so bigger things tend to live longer, but their heart rates are lower. So there's this notion that if you multiply those two things together, there's sort of an allotment of heart beats that a mouse has about the same as an elephant. I mean, it's a little poetic. But we'll come back to that. It's just that the clock runs faster for the mouse. Yeah? The elephant's like, not really, yeah. All right. Okay, that's one thing. So these are, obviously lots of different, these are nails. So these are nails, and you've got to battle there with nails. You want it to work, but you don't want to use too much metal. So people have been making these things for a long time. So they've kind of worked on what's a good shape. Let me write that down. Okay, so here's a bunch of examples. So these are different nails. What's on there? They're different kinds. Yeah, common nails, and then spikes, and then long standard. Right. So there's actually different kinds of things that you bang into things here. This is a slope of 1, and this is a slope of 2/3. I realize it's hard to read. So this is nail length and nail diameter. So if they're growing isometrically, this should be just this power, right? The scaling should be 1. This is a log-log plot, and we're going over, it's only 1 order of magnitude, so a little shaky. It's not so big. But the scaling definitely seems to be lower than 1, and it looks like 2/3. So we get excited about that, and we'll make a little argument for it. That's different to trees, which seem to be, and I need a plot for that. Trees seem to be more like 3 halves, the other way around. So trees seem to have a scaling that's more like this, and you can see that this translates into, as trees get bigger, they get broader faster than they get taller. The scaling is, right, they're allometrics, they scale allometrically. A little tree scaling up doesn't look like a big tree, roughly speaking. So let's see, so we have these things, one of our little arguments. So the length times diameter squared has to be proportional to volume, right? Just a cylinder, let's say that. And if we've observed this statement here, diameter is proportional to length to the 2/3, let's put that in. And we'll do it. So we have diameter is proportional to length to the 2/3, and then we have diameter times diameter squared length must be proportional to volume. And as I was saying, just as for organisms, mass and volume are kind of the big numbers, right? They're the big things to measure. You've got an elephant, has the trunk and all those things, it's great, that's all good, but let's get its mass first, and then we'll measure the other bits. So let's see, so the first one is, I'm going to say what D is. So we can put length is proportional to V over D squared. No. I'm going to do this. This means that length is proportional to D to the 3 halves. Did I get that right? Yeah. So I'm going to stick this into here. So we've got D squared, and then L, D to the 3 halves. So that's 4 halves, right? So we've got 7 over 2. And this is proportional to volume, so D is proportional to volume to the 2/7, which is pretty odd. And we need D times L to get to volume, so that means that L must be proportional to what? Horribly, I've asked the question. D is proportional to volume to 2/7. We need to get D squared times L must be proportional to volume, so L must be proportional to, so D squared is V to the, So your envelope can go horribly wrong. Let's just do a little proportional to how many?
3/7?
Yes. Right, so there's a 4/7. D squared is proportional volume to the 4/7. We want to multiply by this, by L, and we need this is volume, right? This is proportional volume. So to get this to jump up to the next one, you could do this in different ways. 3/7. So length is growing faster with respect to volume than diameter is. So the nails appear to be getting longer and thinner as you go up through them, right? So if they're all the same width, then right, the diameter would be scaling as volume to the 0. It wouldn't be scaling at all, and everything would be in this. And length and volume would scale. Length would scale as volume, right? You grow length. So it's not that bad, but they are if you took this nail, expanded it up, it would be too fat. It would look too wide. Okay, right. And trees have this kind of opposite story. Okay, fun, all right? So here's a little argument for why this is true. So we're just sort of figuring it out. So this is, not my thing. This is from the book. It's an appeal to a result from engineering. This is an old result. Galileo, I think, kind of had this floating around. The columns will buckle under so you've got some column, it's got a diameter, it's got a length or height, and there's a buckling instability which is proportional to d to the 4 over L squared. So that force, so it makes sense, right? So if diameter goes up, the force has to go up as to the power of 4th, actually. So if you make it thicker and broader, it's going to be harder for it to buckle. It scales pretty quickly. But if you start to make your columns longer and longer and longer, they become wiggly and unstable with this L squared on the bottom, right? So the load that you need is decreasing as you increase this guy. It's increasing as you increase diameter. Okay? And this is a result from engineering, to calculate that. Right, so the material, some of those bits will be proportional constants in there, right? So given you've got similar things made out of metal or whatever it is. Ready? Oh. Okay. All right, let's try to rescue you from slumbery things. Ooh. So there are these guys, and then should we just make it very simple? They're also jelly beans, right? Because of the winning, there are jelly beans. All right. Okay, I'm going to keep talking. All right, so yes, so there are constants in there. We could look. I think I'm being a good person. Buckling. Wikipedia has buckling. Right, all sorts of things. Bicycle wheels. There you go. Good stuff like this. Right, so, and we'll get to this formula properly, but there's all this good stuff in here, right? So modulus of elasticity is in there. There's an effective length factor, all sorts of goodness. All right. So much fun. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's get back to our shady explanation for why this works. So, all right, we needed to know this. This was a big sneaky thing to know, right? So given that, then we make this claim that you're hammering this nail in, and the resistive force for it is going to be proportional to the diameter, right? And you could think about the depth that's in there and so on, but just sort of starting off, yeah. So it's a little bit funny as well, I suppose, but you want those things to be balanced at this, right? So that you're just on that edge. You want to make nails that you can hammer in, but don't buckle too much, but aren't too thick that they make it too hard for you, or they cost too much. So we're going to set these guys equal or proportional to each other, and then if we undo this, we've got a d cubed and an L squared over here, and so we can raise them both to the power of a third, so d is proportional to L to the 2/3, which is, so Galileo has as a 1638 argument for this story. Euler, also rather sharp, has it as well, and then it's in the book. All right. Okay, so there are lots of these little arguments. that can solve, that people can be happy about, but we'll see that there are certain scalings that are weird and hard to kind of understand that we're not really sure about. Here's a really thin one. This seems to hold up if you look at data from more recent, world championships, Olympics, and so on. But this is the number of oars people, and I guess it's this data I think was men's rowing in that, at that time, 82, 83 sort of thing. So we've got the sculling, one person up to 8, the heavyweights and lightweights, right? So we have this kind of range here. And then it's a time for 2,000 meters for these people to excruciatingly destroy themselves in a very pure kind of way. So the speed goes up, and there's a ridiculous argument that I may give you, which to play around with. I'll give you all the pieces, very much like the nail thing. Right, so there's how much of the shell of the boat is in the water, there's how much drag is on that, there's how much power you get from multiplying by more people. And it's a very weak scaling, but it seems to be reasonable. So that your speed does go up. But it's not a good return, right? It's super sublinear. And you might think it would do better than this, actually, to be honest. I think you'd think it would help, but no. So 1/9, crazy. All right, that is calculable from fluid dynamic arguments, essentially. And again, you need to know various things about how drag works and so on. All right, that's a fun one. We've seen others. I'm just going to skip through this, ZIP and so on. There's sort of famous ones. There's lots of claims of what's going on in social phenomena. So here's one that's got a lot of press and interest in the last, I guess more scientific interest perhaps, but yeah, there's a problem with that thing. Okay, right. I know what that is. Okay, so it's Luis Betancourt et al., and this is a paper that appeared in, I think it's 2007. I'm sorry, this thing blew up. It shouldn't have done that. Okay, so simple question. Let's take cities and then take the things we can measure about them. And again, it's very much like biology. We want the size of the city. That's going to be our, not not sort of the independent, but it's kind of be the variable we'll put on the x-axis and we'll measure things on the y-axis, right? We'll compare it to things on the y-axis. So lots of things, crime levels, disease levels, wealth, right? You can measure that in different ways. Infrastructure, so there's all sorts of stuff. You measure roads, you can measure essentially electrical cable amounts and so on, right? So, so there's a metabolism of cities that's floating around here. How do you figure that out? I mean, a city's actually, right? We get bigger and bigger cities, and all these sorts of claims about how many people are moving into cities. People sort of dispute, but this idea that, of course, it's observed that people are moving more into cities. Is that good or bad? Energy consumption, what's it take for someone to live in a city? When they don't really know, you don't really know, right? The road upkeep, there's trucks bringing food in and stuff is being taken away. How does that work? And of course, you get nice returns when you put people in apartment buildings compared to actually being, say, out in the woods in Vermont and burning trees and things, So there's all sorts of, but it's a very difficult thing to calculate. Jelly bean disaster? Oh my God. That's sort of what they're for, actually. Yeah. To like fall over, like in a movie, and then, right. That's part of their function. Or to lure extraterrestrials. That was M&M's, actually. All right. Let's see. So, So, interesting thing, function of city size, so N. Now there's density, right? That doesn't seem to matter so much in what I'll show you from what these characters have done. You'd think it should, perhaps, right? But, we'll see. Okay. So understanding why these things work the way they do, why these scalings that I'll show you work the way they do is still kind of an open question. But, you'd think density would really matter. But I have looked at this, right? So we call, the actual extent of a city agglomeration seems to be the technical word, right? Agglomeration, right? So, and the US people tend to refer, like they'll say Boston, they kind of often mean just Boston, the town, but not Cambridge, right? So and it sort of depends where you are, of course. If you're from the other side of the country, you mean the whole thing, which is whatever, it's 5 million people. But you can have people argue about, no, Boston's only this little thing. Well, all right, fine. But there is this sort of functional thing that you can see from space. People go into work and leave, and it's a organism of sorts, right? So if you take those blobs and then look at the extent of them and their population and therefore density, 2 orders of magnitude variation across all these scales in terms of area that a particular city of a given size could subtend, right? So we have massive variation as you go around the world. You have places like Singapore or Hong Kong where it's really tight. Manhattan, of course, fantastically packed in. Okay, so here are a few things. So these are wages. This is for the US. There's going to be a lot of data in here. These, super creatives. So this is measured by patents awarded per person. Interesting idea, right? I mean, so how do you get it whether people are creating things? I believe that's right. So what's going on? So this is the exponent, beta. This is number. This is the log of the number. And we're not sure if this is, to be honest, not sure if this is natural log, which we disputed a little bit. So I showed you the walking thing before, right? This is from the same thing. It should be log base 10. A number of super creatives. So it's increasing. This is a log scale. The power is 1.15, so it's superlinear. Just a little bit, but superlinear, right? So you get this return to scale for this good social thing, this creativity thing, measured through patterns. This is wealth, so that seems to get the same kind of business, 1.12, which is not, it's not 2, it's not taking off through the roof, but there's a bigger cities. You double your size of your city, you don't just double the size of the wealth of people, it goes up a little bit more than that, a little bit faster. On the other hand, you have, this is this funny one for walking, which there's essentially no scaling there, 0.093. And then this is, so here's an odd one. So this is being compared, so there's a comparison to biology, which we'll come back to. This is body mass here. Yeah, so it's mass of organisms here, and this is heart rate. So it's what I was talking about before, right? So it's going down. This is completely observed. This is resting heart rate. So your elephants are out here, and your shrew is just letting it rip here, right? So this is of course scaling. It's going down. So they're trying to appeal here to some of the things you see in biology, which is this returns to scale in the sense that the apparatus and the system required to run the thing does a bit better as you go up through scales. Now you need to eat more, you need to have more sort of range to run around on. There's also questions of how well density of organisms, of scales, or how it might scale, right? So elephants have much bigger ranges than shrews, right? And so they do scale in a certain way. There's some debates about that. All right, so there are a few plots. This is now things sorted in 3 different ways. So this down to here these are all social. I'll say they're all social. These are individual kinds of things, and then this is infrastructure. And so the observation and the sort of general claim is that the exponent, right, so they're all scaling with size of city, that the social ones have these superlinear scaling things, right? So here's the exponent, here's a confidence interval, 95% confidence interval. So some of them are, a bit softer, and they're not, as I said, very far away from 1, but they do seem to be above 1. So we've got things like, so there's money, this is all money, research and development, right? Patents and these sorts of things are in here. Oh, so that's measured in a different way. So new patents are here, invented, just simply people who say they're inventors, which are, they could be completely bananas. But then you have things like this, right? So crimes, and in this case it's AIDS cases, is the thing measured here. But you could imagine other kinds of diseases being put in, communicable diseases being put in and measured. It's a good list of stuff. But there's more data that can be gathered, and that's been done in in subsequent work. I should get that for you. Yeah.
Would it be better to take like blue cases or something like that? Because the AIDS case is like super regional.
Yeah. I think, there's an element of which data was available and so on. And so you can, if you look, I'm sorry about that. If you look here, this is US, China, EU, Germany. So they have these different data sets that they could, and so none of these are known for all these places. So let's see. So this AIDS cases is the US, and it's, it's 2002, 2003. It's not right. I mean, some of this data is old. So the paper is 2007, as I recall, I think. But there's an element of social here, and it's good and bad, right? Good and bad things. Depends what you think about money. These are local things. So how much consumption is there per person? How much electrical consumption is there per person? And these seem to scale much closer to 1, right? So the people aren't changing their sort of functional behavior. They're still using a similar amount of water if they're in a tiny town versus a city, a big giant city. That's the claim. Whereas these are some estimates of infrastructure, so gasoline stations, gasoline sales, road surface. There are weird things there's some things that are just not really well estimated, like parking. How much parking is there in a place? And road surface you can do now, I suppose, with satellites pretty well. So that's not bad. But length of electrical cables, estimates of those. And these things are scaling sublinearly, 0.77, 0.79, 0.8. So you're getting a return to scale. This is a very appealing thing. Let's just make, so which ones we have? There's one in Star Wars, there's one in the Foundation series, Asimov, giant, one big city, the whole thing, the planet, right? I feel bad that I've mentioned the prequels. Okay, so, awful. Yeah, right. It sort of says let's just have a giant city. Although there'll be some drawbacks here. And there is, of course, how the whole thing functions. Though you have big cities and these little regional ones and so on. So you might want to look at that whole story. It's true that in Europe, many of the countries usually have one really dominant. So if you talk about the Zipf's law story for city sizes, it doesn't work at the individual level in Europe because you'll have Paris and they're much bigger. They're off the distribution. So they may sort of effectively be a bit like this. Okay, right. Okay, very interesting. Really, really interesting. And so they've done some work, and I don't have it here, but they've done some work where, okay, you take this scaling, right? You have all these cities, so and it's around the US, and then you sort of you subtract off this idealized scaling. So you measure crime everywhere, for example, crime rates, and then you subtract off this kind of best fit line to it, and then you start to show pictures of where, for a given size of a city, how do you compare to other cities? So it's a more nuanced way than saying, you could just do it directly, but it's a sort of a better way of comparing, a more sophisticated way of comparing cities of similar sizes. And so you can see crime rates are, in the south, for example, higher than they are in the north. And you can really, it really pops. Fun thing to say, but you really, really pops, and it's all being normalized for size. All right. I'm sorry. Okay, so so we've got this thing in general. We've got the global supply costs as sublinear. We have linear for individual costs, so humans are still humans, and then these social things seem to scale super linearly. And I think, I think it remains that it's somewhat surprising, and I've said this already, but somewhat surprising that density doesn't seem to really matter. But I think what's probably happening is denser or less dense places, you just solve it by the way you move around, right? So you have people travel in cars and whatever to bring themselves in. They have subways and so on for different approaches, for different ways to get people. And it's really people mixing together and doing things which may be disease or creating ideas and so on. That seems to be the benefit somehow. And there's different ways that more people to match up with as things get bigger. So Luis has this is a paper in Science. For some reason this one worked. But it's about 6, right? So there's as I sort of show you, right, there's 1, and there's scaling that's like 1.15, 1.2 for the social stuff. Maybe it's 0.7, 0.8 for the infrastructure stuff, so it's sublinear. So this paper, and if you're really interested in this, you can dig into this, has 6 seems to be the thing, right? So it's 6.6, 7.6, and 5.6. That's what the thing. So it'll be 0.833 and 1.167. You know, they're the idealized things, and there's an argument for that, and it's based on people moving around and interacting with each other in the networks. So that's still, you know, an open question, but it's a certainly an effort to do this well theoretically. Right. So yeah, some good guys at Santa Fe Institute right now. All right, other kinds of scaling. So I don't know if you've ever seen this one. Our XKCD friend produced this thing a few years ago. Let's see. Nope. Seriously, ferrets, great. Where is it? Go away. Yeah. So this is a ridiculous plot, right? So dollars over here, thousands. I mean, money is a very hard thing to understand, and there are many orders of magnitude here, right? Millions, billions, and trillions. So if you zoom in on this thing, you can play around. It's a giant thing to play around with. Let me see. It's all sorts of stuff, right? So there's, what's here? So, you know, Harry Potter movie franchise total revenue, it's 21 billion. So these are things that are similar to each other. And the way it's connected is, you know, we have Zuckerberg. These are individual billionaires here. This is, you know, combined net worth of the top 1,200, corporate revenue, charity. And let's see, there's a little connecting line that should show you where this comes from. Yes. Yes. Make it small. Anyway, this is something to play around with. Yeah, so all of these things, dollars, that's this tiny little box here. This is scaling, right? Thousands, that's this tiny little box here. And these are millions, and then, you know, this is then right here, very small. And all these billions end up being this little tiny box here. What's in the billions? Billions are good. Oof. I mean trillions. What am I saying? Am I saying trillions? Trillions, yeah. Wow. Yeah, and there's $1 trillion, which is going to be one of these blue dots. These are billions, and these are 1 trillion. Total public debt. EU is winning that one. Nice. Japan is out there pretty strong. Australia? No. Okay. Just not enough humans. Okay, so yeah. Estimated total economic production of the human race so far. Wow. So that is, what is it? Yeah, $2,500 trillion, which is somehow belief, right? Credit cards, I mean, we have it written in there. Credit cards, credit, it's belief. I mean, money is one of our great social creations, and it's a thing we have in our heads that we believe. But more and more algorithms are involved, so it's a bit confusing. All right, that's a thing to play around with and dig into. Obviously, it's a kind of outrageously detailed business, but there is some fantastic scaling in financial systems. All right, what else we got? Okay, there's another one. I think what I'll do is I'll sort of finish these examples that I have. Just, you know, it's a grab bag of examples, and then I'll talk about this 3/4 law thing on Tuesday. All right. Okay, so this is a history of for Moore's law, right? So this is the time of introduction. This is the number of transistors on a chip, if I have that right. So this is so transistor count doubling roughly every 2 years. And the technology has changed too, because people started to believe in this. Moore introduces or mentions this as a concept way back, I think in the early 80s, maybe even earlier. Says, it looks like this thing is happening, right? And then the game becomes, okay, we believe, right? So we're just going to make stuff that does that, and we must be able to find a way to do it, you know, until some mad physicist says we're at quantum world or something. So that has gone on. There are a couple of different ways to look at that. So this is then going to take more. So this is a paper that just came out last year. Takes Moore's law and applies to all sorts of things, right? So all kinds of industries where there is a returns to scale, right? So if you can build it up in some way, you're making more of it. It costs less to make, so that's good. And it's something that people want, whatever it is. But I'll show you this. They have a list of 60 or 70 things for which they get out some very nice results. Okay, so we're going to have y is going to be the stuff, is the cost per unit stuff. X is the total amount of stuff made after some time t, and so it's introduced at some time, whatever it is. So of course, chips start to appear in the 70s in a general way. Other things appear at different times. So the t is relative to each object or each thing. So there are these three laws that have been floating around. There's Moore's law, which we'll get to, but Wright's law is that cost goes down, how exponentially, but goes down as a power law. I mean, you could think, no, okay, all right. Yeah, no, that's wrong. So decreases as a power law with the total amount that's been made, right? So you're making more of it, and generally speaking, if they're doing that, people figure out how to do a better job, how to make it more efficiently. So this is observed for a lot of different things. Moore's law can be expressed in different ways, but one is that one aspect is that the cost is going down. So there's an exponential decrease in the cost of the thing, the unit of the thing. And that, of course, also had size and all sorts of stuff with it, but basically that's the story there. So that's an exponential decay. And then there's an observation that if you combine these two pieces, and this is Saal, it's a paper, Moore's law is 70s. Let me look at these. When did these appear? So 53. So this is Journal of Aeronautical Sciences, right? This is 936. Awesome. So just about airplanes, cost of airplanes. That's where this comes from. But and obviously Moore's law was very specific, but they're being generalized here tremendously. And Saal is 979. All right. So these are old observations. But the paper I'm talking about is 2013. So if we right, so there's an observation that these two can be put together so that the total amount of stuff made so far is growing exponentially. Right? If these two things are happening, then this is. And if we stick them together, then so if we have the cost is behaving as the amount of stuff to the minus w, then all right, let's do it. Tiny thing. Let's just connect. So each of them have their own factor, right? So we have if y of t is proportional to tongs, very good, minus omega, and we want to put in this guy is e is proportional to e to the minus mt. This one is proportional to e to the gt. And then we had a minus w here, right? So then m, then there's a minus wg, so m has to be equal to minus w plus wg, or w equals m over g. So these, right, so these can be measured independently. You could measure, in principle, measure them independently, thinking they're probably going to, you need to see the good scaling, you need to see exponential growth, you need to see exponential decay. You'd have a semi-log plot here and a semi-log plot here and a log plot here. You can measure all those things and see how well they match up. And so that's what this paper did. So we have a PVC here, magnesium. I mean, they're really different things, right? So magnesium is being extracted. So this back in 1930. The price is dropping. The amount that's being produced is going up. And these are semi-log plots. This is PVC. So again, the price is going down. We have an exponential growth here. What else do we have? DRAM. So this is starting 970. Boom. And then the amount being made growing exponentially. So, this I have 60 of these things. Very different things. And then these are measures of R squared for G and for M, because the exponent here is, did I get it right? The exponent there is minus M, and this one is G. Right, that's right. So the R squareds are pretty good when you measure across them. There's some that don't fit so well, but not so bad. All right. And then you can do this thing of saying, let's measure M, G, and W, and we'll make a M divided by G and see how well that relates to W. This is the y equals x line here. Pretty good. Pretty good. Lots of different things. They're all labeled. You can go into the paper if you want, but some are chemical, hardware, energy, other things, right? So there's very different So, I mean, this is a pretty spectacular bit of work, I think. You know, it's pretty cool. And these are humans doing things, you know, extracting things, making things. Biological systems, I don't know if they would have something similar. All right, so groovy. I think it was fantastic. All right, okay, so let's see. So specialization. So I mentioned this early on when we were looking through this ancient book with all these weird words for things. This is, and we had it for cells, right? The number of cells in organisms, the distinct cells. So this is Mark Changizi, who's done lots of interesting things. Quite taken by this kind of amusing paper he had. He had a nice write-up, actually, this is 2002. 10 years later, there was a nice little write-up in Wired, which you could check out. Went and looked at a whole bunch of things. So universities, how many different, I think, positions that people have in the management. Of course, that's changed. You'd have to, ant colonies, how many different kinds of ants that make up the thing. Ecosystems, I can't remember what the parts were. Organisms, that's cells, and it's on the next. There's a table on the next one. This plot here. This is hilarious. This is it's log, and that's a semi-log, but this is log. This is the number of Lego pieces in a kit, and then this is the number of different kinds of pieces. So this is changed. This has changed actually, right? Because Legos have become more and more, that's just like a cape for Batman. You just stick it on or whatever it is. Like it's very specific to that. There's a whole bunch of things that are made very specifically. But, the old Legos would be, you make an astronaut out of little blocks, and it looks like a blocky. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, but that's a fun thing to play around. It's, obviously we make more complicated things out of these simple little pieces. Well done, Denmark. And the scaling here, that one's a 0.7, I think. Yeah, right. So it's a sublinear scaling. So, again, a bit of a data issue, but this is a good place to stop. So this is the number of node types. This is the count, the number of distinct objects in it, right? So number of types of Lego blocks or different kinds of cells in organisms. And this is the total number of them, right? Distinct ones, total number. And so there's the way they framed it is this power of 1 over d, if there is a scaling, right? So looked at lots of different systems and tried to measure this d, and they called this thing the combinatorial degree. So to the two extremes, if it's a low d, then you have very specialized parts, right? So if d equals 1, the number of distinct objects is equal to the number of objects. They're all different, right? But if d is very large, then it's scaling very slowly, right? I mean, d goes to infinity, they're all the same part, and you're making a system out of all of the building blocks are the same for Legos, literally. Okay, that's those two things. And the observation that they make, which they sort of turn into a claim, is that natural selection produces these high D ones, which have got just not so many building blocks, and it's sort of plausible, you're being evolved, and you got to use what you have, right? Don't want to get too carried away with yourself. And then engineering, we start to do, we start to make many more specialized pieces. And I think actually over time, in some ways, that might go away, right? Because it becomes better to have reusable parts, right? And I think kind of as things become more and more global, there is that whole metric system and whatever, so that makes things a problem. But bicycles, for example, now they can just take them apart with 2 Allen keys, and that was never the case. You had to have tons of different instruments because we were sort of solving the problem of how to make these things well. And so we'd make a piece, and then we'd say, okay, now we have to have a special tool for that. And so we had this sort of, right? And then we sort of got better at it. Yeah?
But you also at the same time you go the other way with like bicycles, how many different derailleurs can you get from like now as opposed to 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Same class of part, but they're all different.
I mean, in some ways, yeah, but also, I guess there's just another effect of the rich gets richer, which means that there aren't so many choices, right? Yeah.
I was curious about like a lot of stuff on cursor grouping too. Is there an op-amp group like diodes and transistors?
If you say they're the same or not. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, let's finish with here's a table you could look at for this because you can see what the part is, right? So Electronic circuits, it's just listed as component. We'd have to go into the paper and see what that was, yeah. And the combinatorial, this degree thing is the important one. So we see here, so ants, 8, these are high. This is organisms with cells, so very high. Not so many cells make up us. I mean, it's insane. It's totally insane. And the same, you have mammalian cells in elephants, so you got those things being used in mice, right? That's a pretty, well done, right? I mean, if we were building mice and elephants ourselves, there's no way we would build them out of the same bits, right? We just would not do that. So that's good. There's just one other piece. So we'll go on to this pretty big story, about evolution, biology, ecology, and something to do with geomorphology as well. Right, Tuesday.
Thank you.